In fairness, talk about the rejuvenation continuing, as we've all commented upon over the last number of weeks since that Sharks defeat in Europe. So there is an extra sheen by the week to their season, the inverse of Ulster almost. This was such an interesting, intriguing game, Fiona. The first 20 minutes, it was all Glasgow, no score. I did find myself thinking, well, this is a matter of when and not if. And then Munster score their opening try on 23 minutes. And by the way, that try, you can talk to us about it, just shows the development in Munster. This wasn't pick and go, pick and go, pick and go. The Fekitoa try, extra wrinkle in the 22. And then Tom Jordan makes just a dumb tackle, a really dumb tackle, and a dangerous one on Conor Murray on 26 minutes. 6-2 split in the bench as well, hurts Glasgow even further. And by half-time, it's 14-0 Munster against 14 men Glasgow. And you kind of think, well, they'll see this out. And they did, admittedly at a cost. Peter O'Mahony, Murray, Snyman, Fekitoa, Diarmuid Barron, and others I'm probably forgetting. Calvin Nash. Yeah, big trouble. So, amazing game in its own curious way. And that 20 minutes towards the end of the first half decided it.
Yeah, look, I suppose it's one of those games where Munster probably look back and think, you know, how did we not have, they'd 46 possession, how did we not have more possession? But I absolutely loved watching the game from start to finish. It was a defensive set. I think if any Limerick person sees Leamy, they'll be buying him a pint over the next few days, because it was absolutely brilliant to watch. It was the Munster of old. It was character. They almost gave Glasgow the ball for the whole second half at times and said, come at us. And they were throwing their bodies in the line. But yes, definitely at times I thought the attack looks much better. I suppose the thing, and I know it's been said, but it's such a shame, we're really seeing that Fekitoa and Frisch partnership. It's started to gel. They're playing off each other perfectly. And Crowley, I thought, was another guy who had a great game as well. He controlled things when Munster had the ball. You know, I thought he carried it to the gain line. He done a couple of when they were blitzing defence. But I suppose the big thing for me was to see Munster, to look how they changed that defence. They blitzed up at the outside, the decision making around those defences. Fekitoa at times, Tyg Byrne getting in the 80 minutes, making those decisions, and being able to come up and absolutely stop Glasgow dead. Glasgow just kicked the ball back to Munster a lot of the time as well. They couldn't break that gain line, and you know they've a lot of sore bodies because of that. And there was a lot of head collisions, which isn't great to see. But this is kind of almost a start. They've been on a roll since South Africa, and to get this win, I mean, Glasgow, it's not easy to beat Glasgow at home, and we talked about, you know, how long it's been last week since Glasgow have been beaten at home. So yeah, there was a red card, but I don't feel that had a huge emphasis on the game for Glasgow. They will argue otherwise, but I just thought Munster's defence and Leamy, they were set up perfectly and they read the game and absolutely went after the breakdown at times as well.
And on Leamy, Fiona, and what he's done with the defence, because I don't think Leinster were thrilled that, you know, he came up, he watched what's going on up here around Dublin, and then he brought it all back down to Munster in his back pocket. What's he done with the defence? I did notice Eddie O'Sullivan on the halftime analysis he used the phrase, I think, that the Munster defence had spooked Glasgow. It was up and in, and so is that a Leamy thing, or are Munster employing that type of defence generally, or was it just for this particular game?
Well, I hadn't seen. I think it was this game. They obviously had done their homework on that. I think it was interesting. Roundtree spoke as well. He said the lads are obsessed with Leamy. That if Leamy told to walk off a cliff, they'd all follow him after it. You know what I mean? So they bought into his system, and he kind of, I suppose, he showed innovativeness to look at Glasgow. They would have reviewed that game in Thomond Park, and it was so disappointing for them and for the fans that were there. And they saw how Glasgow attacked, and they went after that. And I suppose with that blitz, that up and in defence, it's putting a lot of kind of it's in the players' hands. You know what I mean? It's the decision making on when to come up and go after that ball and to get up in their face. And I think it worked perfectly for Munster. So Leamy, he's obviously installed the confidence in the players, because they had the ability and their decision making around that defensive system, especially on the outside challenge. Nash was superb again defensively. Haley has the ability to chop low. You know, he stops those runners coming through. He makes his decisions. He stays upright and then gets in nice and low. So I think they've all bought into his system, Joe, but I hadn't seen that absolute blitz until this Glasgow game. It had come in little bits, and I'd seen it at times, but I thought they'd done it for the whole game, and it really did spook Glasgow.
17 months.
Yeah. I think their only defeat at home this season was by La Rochelle. 17 months unbeaten in the URC. It's a hell of a tough place to go and win. And you've got to give credit to Munster, given where they were coming from, as Fiona highlighted there, after the Sharks game. Leaking all those tries and points back to back against Glasgow and the Sharks. It looked like their season had come aground.
Yeah.
And they headed down to South Africa, basically needed of what they got to even make Champions Cup next season, never mind the playoffs. And they've done both, in fairness to them, and produced a string of really good away results.
Your boy Conor Murray keeps getting the nod ever since.
Yeah, he's good, isn't he? He's just playing. It's great to see how well he's playing, you know. And I just don't think it's acknowledged enough. It's great to see Ireland's greatest ever scrum half adjusting to life as the second best Irish scrum half, and at 33 years of age, coming back and playing so well for his province and his country. It's a great boost for both his province and his country in a World Cup year. And the pity is he's going to miss next week's game now, because he's become so influential.
You can bring us up to speed on that. So Murray, the head injury, 26 minutes. O'Mahony, it looked like biceps, elbow.
Yeah, they're saying arm and
the arm.
Yeah.
Snyman failed HIA. Feketawa with that head
HIA.
as well.
So Calvin Nash HIA.
So who's out and who's probably
Conor
out?
Murray out.
Okay.
Calvin Nash out. RG Snyman out. Malachy Feketawa out. Peter O'Mahony going for a scan today to be assessed as the week goes on, which never sounds good.
Especially when they clearly took a risk on him and it backfired at the weekend. He'd be loath to do it again.
Yeah, and he's so influential. He's just so important. He's still their talismanic figure up front. You know, they need these experienced leaders like...
But that is such a pity for Saturday's game.
It really is. Like, I think Snyman, World Cup winner, Peter O'Mahony, sometime Irish captain, long-time Munster captain, Conor Murray, briefly a Lions captain. Like, these are real leadership figures. To lose one or two, but to lose all three...
they don't have the depth for that.
They don't really have that kind of depth. Although I do think we should give credit to players like Fineen Wycherley, who's been... I'd almost forgotten about Fineen Wycherley, to be honest. And his performances off the bench in both games in South Africa, and again last Saturday around, he's a really talented rugby player and a very good line-out operator, very athletic, he's a good player. And of course he'll be hungry and fresh and wanting to prove a point. And in the same way, John Hodnett was very unlucky to be left on the bench. He's been one of Munster's players of the season. And again, his chop tackling that you were talking about earlier, his execution of chop tackling has been... He won the top tackler in the whole URC this season, regular season. So they do have a little bit more strength and depth than they're perhaps given credit for, but these are still hammer blows, you would have thought, particularly against Leinster and particularly in the Aviva, where I think I'm right in saying since the ground was redeveloped and since that was the first match with a big crowd there, the first proper professional game there back in whenever it was, 2011. I think they've been there 13 times against Leinster and lost 12. Plus they've lost against Saracens in a European Champions Cup semi-final. Plus they've lost against Scarlets in a Pro 12 final. It's a bit of a graveyard for him.
To lose the penalty shootout last year.
Yes, to lose in a penalty shootout as well.
So would Munster, Fiona, maybe view the Aviva as a bogey ground almost?
Yeah, well, I absolutely hate going up there. I haven't had the best of times. I go up with all hope. You know, I love to back the old Munster, but it hasn't been great. And I suppose the worst one was that Toulouse game, and when it went to kicks, it was absolutely terrible day. So yeah, I think it's almost gone to a mentality thing now. I was at the game to beat Leinster, that one game, but other than that, no. I feel like it is a slight mentality when it comes to the Aviva, and it's such a huge stadium. You know, Munster love playing in Musgrave Park and Thomond Park, where you know it's kind of the fans are close to the pitch. You can hear the roar. I think it's going to be about 29,000 that'll be in there. It might be you might get 15,000 or 14,000 Munster fans. They'll travel up the road all right, but it's just not the same atmosphere. Those bigger pitches don't seem to suit Munster. And you're talking about Murray as well. I think it's huge that, you know, Paddy Patterson, who's kind of played a lot of rugby this season as well. He's injured. So you're looking at maybe Casey starting, and it's Cronin, who hasn't played a lot with Munster kind of as backup. So there's just even the injuries from previous kind of, when you look at that scrum half. I suppose if something happens to Casey early on in the game, you're down a good few scrum halves in choices of where they'd go with Munster. So there's a lot going against him, but I suppose all you can look at, and we made Munster made the mistake of looking at that. Well, the fans did when you were thinking, it's a second string Leinster team, because it's obviously the Champions Cup the following week. But look, Munster have built that defence system, they've built that character, and these guys have a chance, the guys that are coming in, to go out and do it. So it's probably Leinster have been outstanding. The Sharks game, I'm sure we'll move on to that as well. They were I wouldn't say outstanding. The Sharks probably didn't show up at times, but they just have the ability to win. And Munster, when it gets to those crunch games in a lot of years, they haven't had that ability, but they'll be trying to change that.
And just a final one on Munster, Gerry. So realistically, they are up against it on Saturday. The three of us were on the Monday after Munster lost to the Sharks, and we were very critical of Munster, and their front row recruitment in particular was just not up to scratch, and there were various issues which were resulting in Munster hitting this ceiling far too often. Are we now upgrading the optimism around Munster, Gerry, or do those criticisms very much still stand?
Do you know what I liked about them the last few weeks? They rediscovered a little bit of the old Munster grit. It wasn't so much about their attacking game. It was partly to do with that, but they just roll their sleeves up and do what Munster traditionally have always done. You think of that Glasgow performance last Friday night, and it brought to mind the old saying, nobody beats Munster twice. Remember that old saying? And they learned so much from that first game. I was interviewing Ian Keithley last week. He's head coach now of UL Bows, and they won their promotion relegation playoff to stay in 1B. They beat Dungannon at home on Saturday. And he was making the point to me that Glasgow game, so many of this Munster team are actually so young that they'd forgotten about the bitter enmity between Munster and Glasgow. And Glasgow brought that kind of interpro-like intensity over to Thomond Park that Munster went, they just almost weren't expecting it. And they learned from it. And it is a serious feud nearly all. That was a savagely brutal game.
Yeah.
It was just so bruising and so physical. You can see they just don't like each other. And in many ways, that's a good thing, that we have a kind of a cross-border rivalry that's got an edge to it in this competition. There aren't many of them that fall into that category, but it was disquieting to see 4 players go off with HIAs.
Oh, it's not good.
It's not good. It's not a good look for the game at all. But I think now to reach the Champions Cup and to have got to a semi-final, they won't like me for saying it, they won't see it this way, but they almost are a bit like Connacht now, almost in bonus territory.
Okay. Fiona, are you upgrading your mood on Munster since the Sharks' defeat then?
Yeah, look, I thought Lockman and Archer in particular over in South Africa against the big South African props. I thought a couple of times when they were tired they got caught out, but I thought they've really improved that unit of Barron, Lockman, Archer. It seems to be, we spoke about John Ryan going to the Chiefs, but I thought Archer has come in. He's put in, I think he played 180 minutes over as well, and he's got himself around the pitch. Salanoa, he's good to come off the bench. Wycherley, to be fair to him, I've always said he's a little bit smaller, and scrum time against the bigger props, I do worry about him, but I thought he came onto the pitch and he earned a penalty straight away. He got himself into a really super position, so I think they've worked hard in those areas. Obviously against the French teams we'd see it a little bit more, but in URC terms I think the replacements, I'd be happy, and let me tell you, Michael Mill didn't have such a great day up in the Aviva either. Do you know what I mean? He was another guy scrummaging wise, he was brilliant around the pitch, but he was a guy that, the more game time he gets, the more, and I think Josh Wycherley is going to be similar. Munster have to give Salano Wycherley, and they'll get found out in games, but they'll work on those scrummaging things, and the more they're in there, the more they'll feel it. So I think scrum time, they'll definitely be a lot more confident going into this game against Leinster, and I've definitely seen huge improvements and far more cohesion with the pack.
There you go. That was but a taste of the full rugby conversation. As usual, you can get the full chat wherever you get your podcast. It's waiting for you right now.